Okay, we're continuing the Holy Grail of Wisdom Quotes by me, Pete Rogers. This is part 14 of Quotes on Ayn Rand. This will also be the last set of quotes on Ayn Rand, greatest female philosopher who ever lived. It says, now she's talking about life in Soviet Russia. She says, in the mind of any person in Soviet Russia, particularly of the young, there is only one final word of appeal: abroad. The meaning of that word for a Soviet citizen is a combination of Atlantis, the Promised Land, and the most glorious civilization on another planet. The concept abroad is a psychological necessity, a lifeline, and a soul preserver. It is not that one hopes for material help or liberation to come from abroad. It is that such a place exists. The mere knowledge that a noble way of life is possible somewhere redeems the human race in one's mind. There is a level of cowardice lower than that of a conformist, the fashionable nonconformist. There is a fundamental conviction which some people never acquire, some hold only in their youth, and a few hold to the end of their days. The conviction that ideas matter. In one's youth, that conviction is experienced as a self-evident absolute, and one is unable fully to believe that there are people who do not share it. That ideas matter means that knowledge matters, that truth matters, that one's mind matters. And the radiance of that certainty in the process of growing up is the best aspect of youth. Its consequence is the inability to believe in the power or the triumph of evil. No matter what corruption one observes in one's immediate background, one is unable to accept it as normal, permanent, or metaphysically right. One feels that this is wrong, this is the exception in life, not the rule. A dictatorship has to promulgate some sort of distant goals and moral ideals in order to justify its rule and the people's immolation. The extent to which it succeeds in convincing its victims is the extent of its own danger. Sooner or later, its contradictions are thrown in its face by the best of its subjects, the ablest, the most intelligent, the most honest. Thus, a dictatorship is forced to destroy and to keep on destroying the best of its human resources. That's an important point. So what she's saying here is, in a communist country, the place is so corrupt that the smarter people, the better people, the more honest, the more Christian people start pointing out, look, this is not right. This is a contradiction. This is wrong. So the communist dictatorship will just kill all of those people. Okay, and I've heard people talking with communist dictatorships and related to the KGB and whatnot, and they says, we just can't control the Christians. They keep on telling the truth and speaking out. We just have to kill them. Okay, and so that's what communism does. That's what atheism does. It kills all the Christians. All right, that's the sort of defining feature of the Soviet Union, was the mass genocide of Christians. Stalin killed 65 million Christians. Okay, that's an important point. That's the defining characteristic of it. It's based on atheism, and it kills all the Christians, killed 65 million Christians, and it burned down 48,000 churches. That's what Soviet Union does. And it destroys everything. All that matters is that the party has money. Everyone else can go screw themselves. That's how communism works. So in the beginning, it comes in as socialism, and we're the people's party. We're going to make things better for everybody. And in the end, the Communist Party takes everything. Everyone else can eat shit. That's how it works. Okay. All right, so Ayn Rand continues. And be it 50 years later, ambitious thugs and lethargic drones are all the dictatorship will have left to exploit and rule. The rest will die young, physically or spiritually. Yeah, that's why the incidence of alcoholism is off the charts in communist country, because the men, they're not allowed to do anything. Okay, so now we're going to talk about Ayn Rand's quote. This one's about World War II and the communism. She said, toward the end of World War II, when Russian troops moved west and occupied foreign towns, the Soviet authorities automatically executed any person who had a bank account of $100 or higher, or who had a high school education. The rest of the inhabitants submitted. Okay, you ever heard of the massacre at Katyn when the KGB shot all the Polish officers and high-ranking educated people? They want to dumb down the population. That's what the Soviets did to the Polish. Okay. This is a physical dramatization of the spiritual policy of mankind's moral intellectual leaders. Destroy the tops and the rest will give up and obey. So basically, they just want a bunch of manual laborers and slaves. They don't want meritocracy. They don't want development of the people. No, they want a bunch of slaves, obedient slaves. Okay, the word Slavic used to mean slave. That's what they want of them. Okay. Okay, now she talks about, social conditioning like in the USA. She says, why is it that Western civilization admonishes its students to admire primitive cultures? The reason? Because they are not admirable. They're backward-ass cannibals like in, South America, a lot of places in Africa, and many other third world countries all over the world. They're cannibals, okay? They were very, very primitive, okay? And everybody wants to come to the West because in the West you got electricity, you got indoor heating. Those are nice things, okay? You got nice buildings you can stay warm in the winter, okay? Why is primitive man exhorted to ignore Western achievements? Because they are admirable, okay? 1500, Columbus sailed across the ocean, okay? Take a look at all the buildings that were made, the Parthenon, the Sistine Chapel, all that stuff was going on while most people all over the world are living in tents and teepees, okay? The West was the most advanced culture in the world, and it's obvious why, because of the Catholic Church, because of Christianity, okay? And that led to modern scientific movement, and that led to modern science, and that led to all these technological advancements, the steam engine, the locomotive, the telephone, the light bulb. That's where it all came from. Okay, she says, why is it that self-expression of retarded adolescents is nurtured and acclaimed? Because they have nothing to express. Why is the self-expression of a genius to be blocked and ignored? Because he does have something to express. Yeah, I know what that's like. Why is some scumbag liar like Peter Attia made this big worldwide celebrity? Because he's a puppet. Why is somebody like me, genius Christian who tells the truth and knows a lot, hidden, ostracized, shadow banned, and censored? Because they don't want you to learn the truth about stuff. They don't want you to be healthy and strong. They want you to be fat, sick, and stupid chumps, employees for life with no options but to obey and shut up. Okay, Ayn Rand continues. As a group, American women are the most privileged females on earth. They control the wealth of the United States through inheritance from their fathers and husbands. Yeah, by divorcing their husbands and taking all their money that they don't deserve. Their husbands who worked themselves into an early grave, struggling to provide every comfort and luxury for the bridge-playing, cocktail party-chasing cohorts who give them very little in return. Yeah, men, we like it when a woman sees it from our side, okay? She says, Women's Lib proclaims that women should be giving still less to their husbands and exhorts its members to refuse to cook for their husbands' meals, with its placards commanding, starve a rat today. Well, where would the cat's food come after the rat is starved? Blank out. Is there something worse than the women of Women's Lib movement? Yes, the men who support it. Yeah, we hate all these white knight wussies who, say it's okay the way America's going. America's being totally feminized, and all the Western world's being feminized. Same thing's happening in Japan. Maybe I'll make a video about it. Anyways, that's it for quotes by Ayn Rand. Certainly her quotes were quite extraordinary. Smartest woman who ever lived, most influential female philosopher who ever lived, a magnificent writer. So, I hope you found that helpful.